The Century Blizzard roared through the Cascades, a wall of white fury. Outside the glass door, a tiny moose calf was succumbing to the 40-degree cold. Inside, Samson, my Malamute mix, pressed his giant body against the pane, his eyes screaming a single, desperate command. Let him in! The problem was I couldn't. I was Eleanor Vance, a retired biologist. My husband, David, a firefighter, had been gone 2 years now. Losing him had nearly broken me. Losing our last litter of puppies had broken Samson. For 3 months, my gentle giant, who once exploded with joy, had been a ghost. He barely ate. He barely moved. But now, seeing the calf, my Samson was alive again. Purposeful, pleading. The tiny calf, no bigger than a kitchen table, was collapsed right there, 3 feet from the warmth. I knew what the protocol demanded. My friend George, the state wildlife advisor, had been absolutely clear on the radio hours ago. Ellie, you know the rule. Do not interfere. A hand-raised moose will be a death sentence later. It approaches people, it gets shot. He was right. 17 years of working with wildlife told me he was right. I stood paralyzed. My training was a steel cage, but Samson's pleading was a key, turning in my heart. He was scratching the glass now, not with aggression, but with a soft, constant whimper. The same sound he made for his puppies that never drew a breath. He was begging for a second chance at motherhood. He was begging for his own life. The calf shivered violently, then went still. Hypothermia was winning. I looked at the thermometer. 2 hours until the worst of the storm hit. 2 hours until the calf was just a frozen shape in the snow. I had to choose, the code of the wilderness or the core of my soul. I pushed the curtains back. Samson leaned his massive head against the glass, eyes locked on mine. I reached out, my hand trembling, and opened the door. The roar of the blizzard hit the cabin like a punch. I stepped out, bent down, and lifted the stiff, freezing body of the moose calf. I had broken every rule I had ever sworn to uphold, but in that moment, watching the relief flood Samson's beautiful blue eyes, I knew I had saved 2 lives, not 1. You might think that saving the calf, who I named Ember, was the hardest choice. It wasn't. The real test of our love, the true crisis of our little family, was still weeks away. The moment Ember was safe inside, warmed by the fire and Samson's huge insulating body, my Malamute mix changed. The ghost dog vanished. He was a mother. He licked Ember's face, nudged his legs, and guarded him fiercely. Ember, for his part, quickly learned that Samson was his safe harbor, his heat source, his mother. This strange, impossible pairing was the miracle that brought me back to life too. I started eating again. I laughed. I even cried happy tears. But as the weeks passed, a big problem grew. Literally, Ember was a moose calf. He wasn't a small fawn. He grew at a terrifying rate. By week 5, he was nearly the size of Samson. He was playful, he was loud, and he followed Samson everywhere, clicking his hooves on the wooden floor. I knew I had to tell George, but every time I reached for the radio, I saw the joy in Samson's eyes. I couldn't bear to take it away. Then the inevitable happened. George called. Ellie, I'm just swinging by your cabin this morning. Need to check on the generator and make sure you're clear of the Century Blizzard damage. My blood ran cold. He would be here in 30 minutes. An animal the size of a large dog, an illegal moose calf, was standing in my living room. There was no time to argue. I looked at Samson. He sensed the panic immediately. Ember, sensing my distress, began to bleat his high, nervous cry. Samson, we need to hide him. Now! I grabbed a tarp and motioned toward the large woodshed attached to the cabin. It was stacked high with firewood. Samson gently nudged Ember, guiding him toward the shed. The calf, completely trusting the dog, followed without hesitation. It was a tight squeeze. We covered Ember with blankets and the tarp just as I heard George's truck crunching on the snow outside. I opened the door trying to look calm. George, a man who believed in rules more than almost anything, looked me up and down. His eyes narrowed. Everything all right, Ellie? You look frazzled. I forced a laugh. The cleanup is rough, George. Come on in. Coffee? He stepped inside, and that's when Samson stepped up. The great Malamute mix, who usually ignored George, started a playful, frantic dance, pulling on George's coat, demanding attention. He was a brilliant, loud, distracting curtain. George, annoyed but amused, spent 10 minutes trying to calm Samson down, never once looking toward the woodshed doorway. He left, shaking his head at the dog, never suspecting the huge secret hiding just 5 feet away. I locked the door and sank to the floor, my heart hammering. We had won the first battle against the law. My blood ran cold. He would be here in 30 minutes. An animal the size of a large dog, an illegal moose calf, was standing in my living room. There was no time to argue. I looked at Samson. He sensed the panic immediately. Ember, sensing my distress, began to bleat his high, nervous cry. "Samson, we need to hide him. Now!" I grabbed a tarp and motioned toward the large woodshed attached to the cabin. It was stacked high with firewood. Samson gently nudged Ember, guiding him toward the shed. The calf, completely trusting the dog, followed without hesitation. It was a tight squeeze. We covered Ember with blankets and the tarp just as I heard George's truck crunching on the snow outside. I opened the door trying to look calm. George, a man who believed in rules more than almost anything, looked me up and down. His eyes narrowed. "Everything all right, Ellie? You look frazzled." I forced a laugh. "The cleanup is rough, George. Come on in. Coffee?" He stepped inside, and that's when Samson stepped up. The great Malamute mix, who usually ignored George, started a playful, frantic dance, pulling on George's coat, demanding attention. He was a brilliant, loud, distracting curtain. George, annoyed but amused, spent 10 minutes trying to calm Samson down, never once looking toward the woodshed doorway. He left, shaking his head at the dog, never suspecting the huge secret hiding just 5 feet away. I locked the door and sank to the floor, my heart hammering. We had won the first battle against the law. I needed a sign. I needed to know the sacrifice was worth it. 2 months later, I got my wish, and it was a sharp, painful blow. Samson and I were hiking near the Release Valley, miles away from my cabin. We were walking a ridge trail when Samson suddenly froze, not with fear, but with that rigid, absolute focus of recognition. My heart leaped. I looked across the meadow, and there he was, Ember. He was huge now, well over a year old, sleek, majestic. He was with a small herd of other young moose. He was wild. He was thriving. I wanted to shout, but I kept my voice low. "Ember, it's us! It's Ellie and Samson!" I could see Samson trembling beside me. The great dog let out a soft, excited whine, the sound of a mother confirming her child's identity. Ember paused his grazing. He lifted his massive head, his big ears rotating toward us. He started walking. He was coming back. Tears streamed down my face. He remembered us. The bond was real. He kept coming until he was just 10 feet away. I dropped to my knees, arms out. "Oh, Ember, my boy, you remembered!" Samson, whining uncontrollably, edged forward for a lick. But then, it happened. As I reached out my hand to touch his velvet coat, Ember flinched. He pulled back, his head shaking violently. His eyes, the beautiful dark eyes I remembered, suddenly held a flicker of fear. Not of me exactly, but of the human touch. The instincts I had tried to suppress for 6 months suddenly flared. The wilderness had reclaimed him. He snorted, a sharp, frightened sound, and spun around, galloping away, melting back into the herd. He didn't look back. I sat there, my hand frozen in the air. The rejection was absolute. I had broken the law, risked my career, and endured months of grief, all for a connection that the wilderness had now severed. It was the lowest point. I had thought I saved him, but maybe I only hurt him more. As we walked away, Samson subdued and silent beside me. I forced myself to scan the ground. It was the biologist in me, always looking for signs. That's when I saw it. Just a few yards from where Ember had stopped. It wasn't the hoof print of a moose. It was a large, distinct, four-toed print with no claw marks visible, the sign of a retractable claw, a cougar, a mountain lion. And these prints weren't just passing through. They were deliberate. They circled the area where Ember's herd had been feeding. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The wilderness had replaced one threat, the blizzard, with a new, far more silent and deadly one. Ember was being hunted. I had given him life, but now something else was waiting to take it away. My heart sank deeper than I thought possible. I had to let nature take its course, but knowing that a silent killer was stalking my boy felt unbearable. Ember was out there, alone, learning the hard rules of survival, and I was just an observer. I told myself it was fine. He had a herd. He was safe. I needed to let go. But the cougar wasn't the only one leaving tracks. I spent the next 6 months living in a nervous fog. Every rustle of leaves was a cougar. Every distant howl was a pack of wolves. Samson, however, was starting to heal, slowly, going through the motions of a good dog. Then one crisp autumn morning, 2 years after the blizzard, he gave me a look that chilled me to the bone. We were on our daily hike, deep in the woods. Samson stopped dead, every muscle rigid. But this time, it wasn't the rigidness of recognition. It was the terror of warning. He started making a low, rumbling growl deep in his chest, a sound I hadn't heard since he was guarding his puppy's whelping box. I asked him what was wrong, but he ignored me. He started pulling me violently off the trail, back toward the cabin. He pushed me with his body. He was pushing me to safety. I knew this wasn't playful. This was primal. I finally calmed him down, but the air felt thick with dread. We continued our hike slowly, but Samson's ears remained flat against his head. He kept looking behind us. And then we reached a small clearing, a place where a lone old maple tree stood. As a biologist, I always checked this tree. It was a known boundary marker, and there, etched into the bark, was a large, distinctive scar. My breath hitched. I knew that scar. It was a mark I had seen only once, years ago. It was a mark left by a mature cow moose, Ember's wild mother. They rubbed their antlers and bodies against the same spot for years. Then I saw the ground. Scattered nearby were tufts of brown-gray fur, and mixed in with the fur were unmistakable cougar tracks, larger, more deliberate than the ones I'd seen before. The full, terrifying picture slammed into my mind. I hadn't just seen cougar tracks months ago. I realized Ember's mother hadn't abandoned him in the blizzard. She had likely been hurt, or maybe driven away by something. And for the last 2 years, she hadn't been far. She had been tracking Ember, and the cougar hadn't been tracking Ember. It had been tracking the mother. The cougar was using the cow moose's known trail, her familiar feeding spots, her marking tree, waiting for the right moment. By saving Ember, I hadn't just intervened. I had drawn a cougar's attention to an area and put both mother and calf at risk. The forest was closing in. The stakes weren't just Ember's life anymore. The danger was multiplying. Samson let out a low, desperate whine. We weren't just in the forest, we were in a carefully set predator trap. I grabbed my emergency whistle and turned to run, but I was too late. I heard the sound I dreaded most, the low, wet huff of something big and heavy. This was not a cougar. This was something worse. We had faced the rules. We had faced the predator tracks. Now we faced the king of the mountain, the most dangerous force in the Cascades. The black bear was massive. It had been startled by us and was instantly aggressive. It stood up on its hind legs, easily 10 feet tall, a huge snarling shadow of fury. Its roar was not the polite warning of a territorial animal. It was the sound of a creature ready to kill. I froze, hand fumbling for my bear spray. Samson exploded. He roared, a deep, terrifying bark that surprised even me, throwing his entire body between me and the bear. He was ready to fight a creature 10 times his size. "No, Samson! Retreat! Slowly!" I yelled, knowing the spray was useless at this range. The bear dropped to all fours and charged. This was it, the end of the line. I raised the can, praying I could hit its eyes. Then the earth seemed to tremble. From the thicket to our right, something exploded into the clearing. It wasn't the cougar. It was a sheer, massive blur of brown and gold. It was a full-grown moose bull. Easily 800 pounds of pure wild muscle. His huge, impressive antlers, a perfect crown of 10 points, caught the sun like twin shields. The bull didn't hesitate. He placed his body directly between the bear and us. He lowered his massive head, pointing those antlers like lances. He let out a challenge, a loud barking snort that no deer makes, a challenge of absolute dominance. Moose do not fight bears. They flee. They survive by stealth. But this bull wasn't following the rules. The bear, shocked by this sudden, suicidal aggression from a prey animal, stumbled to a halt. The bull advanced, pawing the ground, roaring again. He moved with the focused fury of a protector. The bear took one fearful step back, then another. The fight wasn't worth it. It spun around and lumbered back into the forest, defeated by a creature that should have been his dinner. The danger was over. My hands were shaking too badly to lower the bear spray. I looked at the bull. He turned his head and looked at me, and in those huge, dark, knowing eyes, I saw him. Ember. It was him. After 2 years, after I thought I lost him, after I feared I had only made him a target, he had returned. He hadn't forgotten. Samson whined, not the whimper of sadness, but a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. He broke free from my side and rushed forward, circling the great bull. The bull stood still. He lowered his huge, triumphant head. He let Samson lick his nose. He let me drop to my knees and bury my face in his thick, wild neck. I sobbed, not just from relief, but from the impossible realization. He hadn't come back to visit. He had come back to save us. The circle of life, the bond of love, had completed itself in the most powerful way imaginable. Ember stayed for 20 minutes. He let us relearn his scent. He let me touch his massive antlers, these wild weapons that had saved our lives. Then, as quickly as he arrived, he turned and melted into the woods. Samson watched him go, tail gently wagging. He understood. Ember had his life, but he had honored the memory. 6 weeks later, the magic returned. Samson went to the glass door and waited, not with grief, but with quiet certainty. And there he was, Ember. Then 6 months after that, on a bright, peaceful spring morning, the true final reward arrived. Samson was waiting at the door. I joined him, holding my breath. Ember emerged from the tree line, but he was not alone. Walking beside him was a cow moose, sleek and beautiful, and with her, taking tentative, wobbly steps, were 2 tiny moose calves, twins, Ember's family. They stopped at the edge of the meadow. Ember walked toward the house, closer than his mate. Samson stepped out onto the porch. They touched noses, a greeting of shared history. Then Ember turned and made a soft, reassuring sound to his family. Come, it is safe. The mother cautiously allowed her babies to take a few steps toward the porch. They looked at Samson, this giant, gentle dog with wide, curious eyes. I stood there watching my Malamute mix, the former broken soul, silently connect with the next generation of the family he saved. Tears streamed down my face. I had been terrified of breaking the rule, of the moral consequences. But looking at that scene, watching the survival and the continuation of a beautiful, wild bloodline, a life that existed because of an act of pure compassion, I knew I hadn't broken a rule. I had honored a higher law, the law that states love endures. It wasn't about protocol or policy. It was about recognizing that sometimes the wildest thing we can do is simply care. And sometimes the lives we save find ways to save us right back. This isn't just one story of hope. It's proof that miracles happen in the most desolate places. If you were moved by Ember and Samson's impossible connection, tell us what part touched your heart the most in the comments below. And please subscribe to Wild Heart Stories so we can share more of these extraordinary bonds.